Afternoon. Yes, that was a family moment for everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to another Raíces Cyber Educational Series. We're very excited. As you know, this is part of our educational offer targeted to lift and empower our community of cyber defenders. Please consider supporting our mission so we can continue bringing this kind of excellent programming. You will see a barcode at the end so you can become a member of Raíces Cyber and enjoy excellent programming like this one. Today, we have our friends and partners from RSEC and IBM who are bringing a great and right on point seminar nowadays called Shadow AI and its business impact. So I want to thank them for this great resource. And I want to encourage everybody who's watching to make sure you check out the full program. This is just one webinar from a series of already recorded sessions, which has a technical and an executive track. So make sure you go to raicescyber.org under program CyberMasters. And at the end, we'll share a QR code for you to join our program as well. So without further ado, I want to say thank you and welcome to our friends. Jose, please join us and introduce our special
Excellent.
guests.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Yaris, for the invitation. Really excited to be a sponsor of the Cyber Master program. So we really believe in this mission to bring the latest in cybersecurity and real problems, right? That our organizations in the US and also across the world are experiencing. So we can bring some insights to the members of Raices, but also to the members of the program. And I invite those that haven't joined yet to stay until the end so we can give you more information to save the program. So for today, we have the honor to have guest, a stellar guest of list of guests. We have Juan Vasquez, Managing Director and Senior Information Security Officer at State Street Bank. Juan has plenty of experience in several areas of cybersecurity. In particular, has been dealing with this situation and problems and challenges regarding shadow AI. So we are really fortunate to have him, so he can bring and some of the challenges to the table and see what type of insights and recommendations and how the technology can support and can help companies to embrace those challenges. In the representing the technology side is Rob Pigtail, the data security technical specialist at IBM, years of experience in cybersecurity and the data side, and now very focused in this situation of shadow AI uh, with product from the IBM Guardian family. He gonna be reviewing several practical cases with Juan and providing the technology perspective, some recommendations, and then we're gonna finally gonna try to wrap up those for you the attendees, so then you can take away some recommendations and next steps for your own situation and your organizations, whether it be college, university, companies, or your own company. Okay, I would like to now share a bit about the agenda. So I say before, gonna do a quick introduction about what shadow AI is, why this is important, why this is so critical these days, and then in order to understand better that and get some advice and best practices to respond to similar problems in your situation. We're gonna focus in three specific case studies that I'm gonna describe in a minute. We're gonna have that interaction between Juan and Rob, how to approach those challenges. And at the end, we're gonna, for every case, there are some recommendations either from Juan or Rob. And then at the end of the presentation, we're gonna put those summarized so we can make sure that the webinar has been useful and productive for all you guys. And of course, the philosophy and the approach at the end gonna be how to be more proactive, right? And how to take actions and in the long term, not only be reactive and responding to some specific short-term breaches or events. Well, I think now it's time to get started. Let me introduce quickly the three use cases, and then one by one, we're gonna go in depth. So the first one is pretty common and is because the lack of visibility. So we call it the board oversight versus shadow AI reality. And shadow AI meaning all those technologies, programs, projects, apps, any use of AI that hasn't been authorized. So it rounds, I am sure rounds a bell in your own situation. And the idea here is give additional tools, alternatives, and ways in the company's organizations to try to understand what type of AI or projects are running over there and try to have a measure of the risk and make decisions. Otherwise, as so many companies are doing these days, they are blocking the AI, but they are blocking their innovation as well. So we try to find a mid point where you still can have innovation, but with more governance. So that's gonna be the first case, how to complement the board kind of approach with more productivity and visibility and some additional controls. The second one also is pretty common. So with so many projects, so many groups and teams, right, trying to be innovative and bringing AI to the organization, how that gonna impact the audits and as a result whether the company is compliant or not, depending of the industry. As much regulated, then the impact can be higher. So in most of these cases that or the examples we're gonna be discussing today are applicable to finance, to banking, to healthcare, to insurance. So very deep regulated. So any new IT, including AI, gonna impact how the critical assets are being used or exposed, right? Whether it be clients' information, student information, patient, intellectual property. So how to deal with that is what is about the use case number two, the compliance situation. And then finally, the risk of AI in terms of who is using it and what type of critical asset going to be exposed. It's not only about the internal projects, it also can be external impact, right? So whether it be software factories that are developing software for your organization or maybe SaaS type of products, AI, Gen AI, some models that you're going to be bringing to train with your own data. So how to take also control on that and oversee and put some methodology, some process so that you can vet all your providers and then make the decision whether to work with them to improve their posture regarding the security or gonna need to be put on hold until the situation is corrected. So in that way, it's not only about trying to have visibility, control, and enabling AI internally, but also externally. So these are the three cases. We like to go one by one, bringing the experience from the client perspective with Juan, and then Rob gonna allow to show and show how technology can support and some advice. And we're gonna have some interaction here, understanding the problem, how to approach it. We wrap up, and then we go to the case two and so on. Okay, well, let's get it started, the game here, and please over to you, Juan. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jose. Thank you for the warm welcome, and I appreciate spending some time with you all to discuss shadow AI. I think from my perspective, like you mentioned, Jose, right, like that the focus should be not to disable all of AI, right, because then you limit the way you can innovate and the way that you can adapt to the business needs, right? The focus is for us to support the business needs and drive innovation. So I know that shadow AI, a big focus is preventing like some of the security vulnerabilities that exist within having shadow AI or the data leakages and privacy concerns and some of the regulatory non-compliance stuff. But I think there should be a balance between board oversight and also like innovation, right? So for me, it's always like understanding how we can balance both, right? And I think there are ways to do that because you have to do it right, or else you limit your innovation and you limit your business growth. So for me, what I always like to discuss in this particular topic is like how do we balance both, right? And a big factor for me and understanding how I manage something and how I set a plan for success is like understanding, well, what's out there, right? Well, how can I get visibility? How can I understand what's out there for me to manage, right? Like if I don't know like what's out there, how can I set a plan, right, to manage it? So, Rob, from my perspective, a big focus is always understanding if my organization, if my end users are using AI, I'd like to understand if there's a way to just understand if there's a way of inventorying that, or understanding how I could possibly find a way to recognize that they're utilizing it, right? Because I think that's a big focus for any organization is understanding what your end users are doing, right? So I'd like to see if you've come up with any solutions or have any relevant use cases when it comes to inventorying AI.
Sure. Great question, Juan, and an excellent place to start. So what I'm going to do is what we're looking at here is the solution. I think sorry that Jose mentioned before. We have a tool called Guardium AI Security. And one of the key components to that is indeed an AI inventory, right? So, when it comes to any type of data security, we like to say, and it's kind of a fact, you can't secure what you don't know, right? And so just like, shadow IT can be a problem, people spinning up relational databases in cloud environments, shadow AI is indeed an issue as well, even more so because, as you mentioned, Juan, there are a number of risks that can be associated, right? People can train these models, for example, with, personally identifiable information. Some of these endpoints, chatbots, for example, can be, prompt injection can be used to, have them perform, improperly and potentially leak, information that shouldn't be out there. So it's very important to capture all this. So what you're looking at here in the tool is that the AI inventory, and we have a number of components, and we'll get to some of these later, but each component has kind of a dashboard capability, right, where we can understand what it is that's out in the environment, and it breaks it down, right? So we've got an AI asset landscape, which talks about 370 different AI technologies, resources, unreviewed AI resources, and unapproved AI resources. These are those shadow AI resources. And what's really great about the tool here is that it does discovery and classification of these AI resources, and classifies them according to their purpose, right? So we've got a number of AI agents, for example. We've got cloud platform inventories. We've got AI services. We've got large language models, chatbots, et cetera. So it does a really good job of breaking down the inventory and understanding, what each of these things are doing, right? We also break it down further in that we kind of categorize where we've got platform as a service type technologies, right? So IBM Watson X AI, for example, or Databricks Unity Catalog. We've got model inventories. These are all the AI models that are being used, and talks about the number of resources in these models, and then the organization being used, right, using them. Organizations are a way where we can hierarchically classify usage in the system. Then we've got, AI software inventory, service inventory, development resources, and even an agentic inventory. So we have a really a great way of being able to classify these and give an overall view as to the entire AI inventory.
Nice, great. Follow-on question, and I appreciate you showing all of that. Having a way to categorize what type of AI is being utilized, have you seen it be used in a use case where it helps you prioritize, right? To take we're all cybersecurity professionals, so taking like a risk-based approach. Do you think that by understanding the type of AI, it would help someone like myself prioritize, right? Because in my world, everything's an emergency, everything is a priority. So for me, a good use of a tool is how does it help me prioritize, right? How does it help me focus on what's priority now versus I can, hold off till tomorrow. So like, would you see that this tool could help with that?
I do. One of the things that we can do is we can kind of sort through the active technologies and understand where there might be issues, right? So for example, if I drill down on the list of active technologies in the system, I can right away see those that are approved or unapproved, right? So approved means that somebody went through and took a look at this particular resource to see if there were any misconfigurations or vulnerabilities or things like that. And then here's an example of one that has been unapproved, right? So that would be a way to prioritize some of that. We also have a view, an overall AI 360 view that we call it, which gives us a risk profile basically of the entire system. And again, I talked about that sort of hierarchy, right? So right now I'm looking at all the organizations or individual projects, if you will, in my particular organization, but I can see a number of ways to kind of break that down, right? Number one is there's an AI safety score. And in this case, the higher the number, the better. So we've got some work there. I, again, can see the number of shadow AI resources. But another really good focus is the vulnerable AI resources. So for example, I've got 87 critical resources, and I can drill down onto that, and it'll show me the individual resources and with a description of maybe what's wrong with that. So it's a great way to help prioritize, where I should start looking, and it helps in that regard.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That it does seem like it would be useful to, drill down, especially in the AI risk scorecard, right? Because I think not only at the board level, it's good for them to be aware, but like specifically at the tactical level, I think getting to the weeds of like what's the actual issue, right? How do we fix the vulnerability itself so we can prevent some of these downstream things from happening? So appreciate showing me that.
Great. What else, Juan?
I would say so. Like I know we talked about focusing at the board level, right, and inventorying it and understanding the inventory. After we understand it, right, and we do have some ways of prioritizing it, and from your perspective and the way that the tool is built, like what is a good use case? Not only, like I said, I mentioned at the board level, we're going to report it, but how have you seen the tool be used more at the tactical level, like an engineer being able to like identify an issue and fix it quicker versus, versus later?
Yeah, good question. So if I go back to where I was drilling down on those vulnerable resources, you can kind of see, I can drill down onto each of these when I want to look for one that maybe has an issue. But if I drill down on, I don't know, React agent, I can see here that in this particular case, there are no misconfigurations or no vulnerabilities or things like that. So in a real life example or a better example, you would see that there's actually an issue to be addressed, and even some remediation steps. The system can tell us what steps are necessary for remediation. So I apologize, I don't have a good example of one right here.
Is there a when it comes to remediation steps, is there a way to essentially help the engineer? Like I know they're you're gonna recommend, but part of the remediation aspects is always like vetting, right? Those remediations, right? Like or also like the false positive aspects of some vulnerabilities, right? Like I work in that space as well. So does the tool incorporate like trying to vet for those false positives?
It does. It'll go through and make a description of, it'll provide a description of the vulnerability and take you out to some, I'm trying to think if I can find one. I apologize. Yeah, here's one, for example, right? This one has a critical issue and 3 vulnerabilities, right? So in this case, these are CVEs, right? So if I drill down on these, it'll give me a full description of the CVE and provide some steps as to how I can actually go and remediate that, right? So for example, this one's talking about, the vulnerability is the CVE 2024 24591 in clear ML, et cetera. And it'll provide, steps as to actually how to remediate this, right? So I can actually click a button here and actually go out and have the system automatically remediate this CVE finding. So we do provide some support for that.
Okay, great. That's a good
Excellent.
capability to know that it has.
Yes. Excellent. I think this interaction has been very useful to imagine how an organization can set up some specific steps, right, when it comes to maximize the use of AI, but in a secure way. So beyond that, I think what we can learn here is beyond just having a board that gonna meet regularly, review requirements for new projects, and then either approve it or put it in review, then having this visibility of the AI inventory, and not only about that, but having a way to classify, to set priorities that can enable a better way to make decisions, right, and introduce new policies as well,
Mhm.
right? New policies
Yeah, I
that
would
gonna
agree.
cover, yeah. And
I would
finally,
agree, Jose. The only one thing to add is like
mhm,
working in the AI space, and I have various vendors pitch AI and how they can help us, right? Like I think this tool also looking at it like broadly and maybe thinking outside the box. I think it would help also when it comes to vetting AI, right? Like because in my world, a lot of my time is spent vetting vendors and their capabilities and what they're offering. And I've had some use cases where they're pitching it as AI, but in reality, when we get to the nuts and bolts, it's really not, right? It's they're
mhm,
leveraging other
mhm,
technologies, but just branding it, right, as
okay,
AI. So I think to Rob, maybe a use case that hasn't came up but might be relevant is this tool could also probably help you vet if the actual technology itself is AI and what type of AI, because that's also an important piece when it comes to just understanding what your vendors can do along with what your internal folks can do, right? And what AI is actually being used, and if it's really AI, right? I think that's something to note as well.
mhm,
Yep.
exactly. So if the technology they are pitching to you are not in the inventory, well, that's a strange, right? So you actually, maybe the app is not using, the solution is not using too much, maybe it's using some, but it's not the core, right?
Yeah,
And that
right.
should not be sold as the main capabilities. So, but I think the goal in this use case has been how an organization can go from just be reactive and being a proven project by project
Mhm.
versus just having visibility and try to identify those that hasn't been approved, but then in the process, eventually, right, gonna have
Mhm.
less shadow AI because you have the process, you can be proactive, and then even
Mhm.
you can fix, you can identify the type of vulnerabilities that are coming with
Yeah,
the use of AI. So I think the great contribution gonna be that. Well,
yeah.
let's get ready for the second use case. So we come from visibility to assessment to action and even remediation. Now let's take a look on how the lack of visibility or having the right visibility and the right ways to define policy can help to stay compliant, right? Because maybe the audit can be affected, can be the way to do the audit is different, right? And then let's see what the experience says, Juan, and how Rob in from the technology part can help.
Yeah, I think it was a good, like the first case built on the second one. The first one is really understanding what's your landscape, right? What's out there in the wild, like what AI and who's using it, right? So I think use case number one is foundational, right? Like how can I fix something if I don't know it's out there and I don't know if it's broken? The second use case for me, it's more making sure that I can abide by regulatory and compliance requirements, right? Like working in the financial services space, we're highly regulated as many other right spaces are. But if you're having to deal with regulatory and compliance aspects, like they're going to come asking, right? Like foundationally, the question will be, how do you understand what AI is being used out there, right? So use case number one will fulfill that. Number two is going to be tying it back to what actual standards or what actual policies that are out there that they're going to be using, right? Like like the AI EU AI standard for me like comes to mind, right? Because I work in Europe and I work in that space. So like I have to abide by that regional geographical requirement, right? Just like if I build products in the US, I have to follow some of the US regulatory compliance requirements. So like Rob, for me, like understanding if there's visibility as to what that regulatory compliance requirement is, if there's ways of mapping it, right, to ensure when the auditors come knocking or the regulators come knocking, I can show them, hey, we've factored in all the regulatory compliance requirements, and here's how they're mapped, right? And so it makes it a smoother, easier process, right? Versus they come and they ask me, how do I understand what AI is out there, and I can't give them a good answer. That's when it creates an issue, right? When we have to address regulatory and compliance gaps. So, Rob, is there a specific kind of use case or way of understanding how this tool will help you comply from a regulatory compliance aspect?
There is. So we've got a good question again, Juan. We've got a compliance component to the system here. And I guess I would say that first thing I'd say is the regulatory rules and compliance rules for AI are relatively new, right? And so you mentioned like the EU AI Act. We've got a couple that we support out of the box, and those are listed here. The EU AI Act, I mentioned ISO 42001. We've got some NIST frameworks, and those are, we can basically, complete an audit. We can, generate an audit based on that framework, and which provides those answers and reporting capability that that are needed. So, for example, again, kind of a dashboard look, right? I've got, in this particular instance, I've got 62 projects that are currently being audited, 9 projects, right? And again, a project is like a collection of AI resources that, are used for a common purpose, maybe an application or something like that. And that's kind of the definition of that. And then we can go ahead and identify, well, what are those audit gaps? And then, what remediations are outstanding, right? So we can get a pretty good snapshot of what's going on here. Here's a couple of cases where I can see the gaps, right? So I've got a compliance gap. And again, this is this particular project, a project called AI for Productivity. That's just something that someone set up. So I can understand here, I've got some information. Number one, what is the EU Artificial Intelligence Act and what is it all about? And then I can understand, what are some of those compliance gaps and start to address, those to correct them. So if I look here, I can generate a compliance audit. So I'm going to look at this one. Again, this particular project is around cardholder accounts. And if I click the compliance audit feature over here, what it's going to do is it's going to launch, we use a tool, a workflow management tool called Asana that we use to actually conduct that compliance review, right? So if I kind of close down all these sections here to get a better look, I can see the first section is around requirement review. I can see this is the first step in the compliance audit. I've got some information here which says I need to understand the context of the organization, right? And this maps to what is clause 4 in this case it's the ISO 42001 management system. So I can see all the individual steps that are necessary. I can assign them to people. So it's basically a workflow capability that allows me to go through and determine all the information that's necessary for this compliance audit and complete that, and which will produce a finished report when I'm done. I also have a capability of, we have a hub capability, which is a place for documentation where I can store any system documentation that are required for AI compliance, that compliance review, right? So I can, this is, a documentation that I can upload to the system to keep track of that, right? So I've got PDF documents, Word documents, any documents that, are appropriate to that. And the other, the way I can kind of get started on this, or to get through, or to begin the process of a compliance audit, is I can, there's a questionnaire that I fill out some questions. So I'm going to pick this one, the Acme insurance demo. And I can actually start a questionnaire where it's going to ask me certain questions around, does the project use a large language model? Does the project use machine learning models? Are AI systems used, right? So it tells me, it gives me a method of describing my particular project and being able to understand, what particular framework it might refer to. So that's a quick view of the compliance module. And then I can issue some reports at the end, which will, generate a report. So does that answer your question, Juan?
It does, and I appreciate you breaking it down between like two relevant ones, which are the EU AI Act, and then in the US, many of us follow NIST, right? So it's good to see that you're capturing like both angles. Another just follow-on question for me is, are there any like standards or up and coming AI regulation that you're aware of that you're gonna try to incorporate into the tool? For me, I deal with the world of SOC and SOX, and so because I'm a financial service institution, so I'd be curious to know, like, is this like a dynamic kind of ongoing adding relevant standards and regulations as needed?
So good question. It is. I'm not on the development team for the tool, but I can tell you that we have pretty much do sort of a continuous development process, right? So as regulations become standardized and whatnot, we can easily add them into the tool. So as these regulations become standard, and maybe more so here in the United States also, we'll be adding those frameworks to the tool. The other thing that I forgot to show was, we've got this compliance heat map, and this doesn't necessarily answer your question, but I just wanted to show it, where again, very visual, where executives could come, board members, if you give them access, to be able to understand on a project by project layer, like what how are we stacked up against certain compliance regulations. And obviously there's a lot of red here with a lot of 0%, so we're not looking too good at this moment, but it's a good way to be able to track that and understand your posture as it relates to compliance.
Great. Yeah, that's a good way of just high level giving them an overview of where are we from a compliance side of the house.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And then taking a deeper dive with fixing these numbers, right, that look poorly, and remediating some of these gaps. That would be at the tactical level with the engineers, right?
Yep. And back to that 360 dashboard, there is a compliance progress widget, I suppose you'd call it, which talks about how we're mapping against the various compliance frameworks.
Yeah, I think that's great that like you have a compliance aspect, because I can envision you having a regulator come, and if you can show them, hey, we've already identified some of the gaps, right, that we have before you even come, it serves you good purpose, because you're being transparent and you're showing them that you're proactively addressing them, right? So like, I'm showing you my report card even before you give it to me. Here is what I know is broken, and we're ongoing to fix it. And then obviously their focus will be more now, let's cover any areas that you haven't identified. So it's a good way of like being transparent and working proactively with the regulator.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. Thanks. Thanks,
Excellent.
Juan.
Yeah, I think we can see very clearly, right, how this type of visibility on assessment, continuous assessment, on a way to automate fixing so all those elements that could impact negatively an audit. Okay, so I think is very is so it can enable the board to be certainty, right, about the upcoming audit, knowing that at least for the side of shadow AI, none of those spontaneous kind of projects that can, pop up in any moment gonna affect negatively an audit. So I guess this then can be part of the compliance board, right? And then they like an additional dimension, right? They can check what's the risks, the posture, and then take actions, whether it be adding a new policy or talking to the team that is, creating the exposure and so on. So I think that can represent not only saving money, saving headaches, but also impact on the image, right, for a potential lack of compliance or maybe even exposure of confidential data. So I think we are building a really good moment here, and with these two use cases from, again, visibility, a way to assess immediately what's going on, and then acting, so to protect the critical asset and also to be ready, compliant ready. Now let's take a look on the external impact, right? Because so far we have been talking a lot about internal development, internal projects, internal shadow AI. But as I said before at the beginning, what happened with those? So maybe I don't know in your case, Juan, what you see in the market, but maybe 50% of the development is done outside, right? And even maybe outside the country. So how to make sure that the development that is coming, that is being required, right? So how to understand if that bill of material was following the policies that you defined for your internal team. So you need also to make sure that that code, that development is coming and is not opening a new source of vulnerability. And then also all the SaaS or the user level type of applications that come with AI embedded, how to know, right, if those also going to be increasing the risk and exposure. So let's talk about third parties now. So over to you, Juan.
Yeah, thank you, Jose. Yeah, I mean, you captured a couple of the topics that come relevant to me based on me dealing with vendors. And as you mentioned, like usually developing technology is a partnership between internal and vendors. I have not seen it where everything is just in-house unless you're a technology provider, right? But if you work in financial services like I do, outsourcing is normal. So, part of our biggest risk and focus is always like understanding our vendor management space, understanding our third-party risk. Relevant to AI is focusing on the supply chain side of the house, the understanding, as you mentioned, of if we're utilizing a SaaS and we're purchasing that SaaS product and they're pitching it as we're using, AI as part of that service, we do have to have some visibility and understanding as to what type and what they're doing with it, and are they managing themselves the right way, right? Because the two use cases are internal, but we are only as strong as our weakest link, right? So when it comes to managing our vendors and supply chain, we also have to have an understanding of what they're doing, right? When it comes to managing AI and reducing shadow AI as a risk, right? So I think that's usually the focus area when I'm speaking to vendors and speaking to technology teams on how are we going to build something. Those are some of the relevant topics we usually discuss. So Rob, for me, that's the lens that I like to tackle this, is like understanding really how do I get an understanding of my supply chain risk? How do I get an understanding of what my vendors are doing when it comes to their AI practices, right? Those are the two kind of areas that I want to focus with you on.
Yep. Okay. Great topic. Thanks, Juan and Jose. So I think you hit the nail on the head, right? We definitely feel that, you need to treat, in this case, AI vendors, right, as part of as a critical part of your supply chain. I like the way you describe that. So back to the tool, to the Guardium AI security tool. We have this module here we call TPRM, which is third-party risk management. So like all the other modules, we have a dashboard that gives you, a very quick overview, a visual overview as to how you're doing with response to, risk profiles and, in this case, AI service providers, right? So in our example here, we've got 30 different vendors, what we consider to be AI vendors onboarded. We have a couple under review, one in remediation. So it talks about, where we stand with respect to, our particular vendors. Some top remediation issues listed here. One is contractual requirements, information security, and then, a breakdown of issues in terms of criticality. So I've got a number of these here. So if I can drill down on my list of vendors, right, the ones that are in the system. So for the way that this stuff got here, or the way that we add vendors is we've got a pretty selective list, right? So the vendor need. First thing I do is select the vendor name, right? So those out of the box that we support quite a few of, what we're considering AI vendors, right? So, Salesforce, for example, Google Cloud AI, the list kind of goes on and on. We can go ahead and actually start to define, what category do they fit in? What's the vendor importance? Is it something mission critical versus moderate? So you decide kind of what, what the attributes of this particular vendor are and what you want to do. So if I go back, and that's how I get these into the system. So for example, the first one here, right, we chose Grammarly as a vendor, right? So it's an AI service provider. Our assessment is ongoing, and right now we're in a status of remediation. So something took place, right? I don't know if you saw a second ago, we gave it a risk score of 7 out of 10. So it's not too bad, but I can drill down and to understand a little bit more about what's going on with this particular vendor. There's a description of what the vendor does, and then, who can I contact at the vendor, which organizations against which projects are actually using this, and how often do I need to audit this, right? And I think you mentioned this before, Juan, because obviously we don't have access to the source code, right, or the applications, right? We rely kind of heavily on survey information that we'll send to the vendor and have them answer questions about, their particular, applications, and provide, information back to us so that we can make an informed decision and do some risk assessment. We've also got, an internal survey that we can do. And at the end of the day, what we'll generate is a vendor report. And it takes a couple minutes to generate this. So I went ahead and built one out ahead of time. And so this is an example of the vendor report that gets generated, where it's to our management team, locally. In this case, we're representing a company called Acme Health. But it talks about, the responsibilities of this assessment, and then gets into actual findings, right? So a background on the vendor, information about what the, this particular vendor, I mentioned it's Grammarly, right? It's a digital writing assistant. And then it gets into, major areas of concern and things like that. So we can produce that report that, provides some guidance there. The other thing I wanted to show is if I kind of drill down on this, I can see some information about the inventory of, meaning what pieces of the technology are being used in our projects, right? So I can see, if there are particular issues or whatever. Again, in our third-party vendor management, we can look at issues, right? So example here, again, this is an issue. I'll take this critical issue, right? So ISO, this particular issue says that ISO 42001 is stipulated in the contract. So I can see some information. They don't have a clear contractual obligation to achieve ISO 42001 compliance, which poses a risk to, therefore, or in turn, poses a risk to us, right? So we have to make some decisions about, do we want to continue supporting this vendor or, allowing this vendor to be used in our environment? Or is it something that we're going to have to say, look, we're, thanks, but no thanks. We can't really decide. We can't really continue to include this as part of our infrastructure or as part of our solutions, our AI components, because we can't, we deem this risk too critical to take.
And Rob, I would assume that since the TPRM space is dynamic, right, ever evolving, that onboarding of vendors, there's going to be some, generic ones, right, that we know that are out there in the field. But also, I'm curious to know, is there a way for you as the end user to essentially add a vendor that utilizes AI in a way where it might not be a traditional vendor that is known like Grammarly? It's more unique, right? Like in my world, financial services, there are a lot of vendors that are very specific to financial services, right? So
Yep.
is there a way to essentially add a vendor? And my follow-on is, you as the product owner, are you always kind of vetting and adding vendors that you see that are out there to make it easier for end users like me?
Yep. So I'll answer the second question first. That answer is yes, right? Similarly, that the way I answered the question about, new AI regulatory requirements, same thing. We keep a close watch on the industry and what's going on in this space, and we will, constantly adding vendors to, to the solution. To answer your first question, when I went back to the, create a vendor button and, went to set that up, right? So the list is indeed pretty extensive, but also if I can't find that particular vendor, click here, I can add that in. So I could go again and say, vendor X, whatever I want to call them, and actually go and it'll start to create that process, right? So don't forget that we should have added it to the list here. Look, but again, there's a number of it's basically a questionnaire that we're going to send to that vendor to fill out to give us an idea on the risk profile.
Right.
So yeah, we can add those, but of course, having it sort of supported out of the box is probably the more preferable approach.
Right. And actually you mentioned like the vendor X example is a good example of like you can set up that vendor, send the questionnaire, and even within that questionnaire, like I mentioned in the past, that there are some vendors that pitch themselves as AI providers and utilizing AI in some
Right.
way. The questionnaire could also be a good way for you to vet them to see if they're fit for purpose, right? Are you actually using, AI, or are you just kind of marketing yourself that way?
Right. Yep. And then that might show up too in this vendor AI technology, easy for me to say, right? Vendor AI technology usage, right? So I can see, these particular vendors, these are the components that are being used in, all the vendors that we've, these 30 vendors here, right? So if it turned out that, one of these, we had a vendor with no components, that would kind of prove out the point that, oh, perhaps this vendor claims that they're doing something AI related, but they're not using any AI technologies that we know about, right? And so
Right.
that could be another way to kind of spot that.
Great. Appreciate it. That's all I had on my end, Jose, conscious of time.
Yeah, excellent. And I think also it's very clear here that any organization can have a balance, right? So it's not only about discovering and acting of internal development or projects, but also how to tackle the challenge that maybe can be even bigger, right? Of so many new providers that has AI infused or embedded, and as Juan say, some others they claim that they provide AI, but this also can be a way to detect that, right? So I really appreciate the presence and the time collaboration and bringing your experience, Juan, to this webinar, and of course also Rob that have been working with clients recently around this theme can also share the way that technology and providers like IBM has been supporting them. So wrapping up, so we see here that everything started from the visibility, right? That this is the first thing, as Rob say. So how you can protect what you don't know? You don't know what you don't know. So it's important to have that first view, end-to-end 360 view, detecting the AI inventory, and then doing some kind of assessment that can allow the organization to act, and whether maybe defining new policies, new boards, or new meetings, or even running some remediation, right, for those vulnerabilities. Then it's excellent to see that this type of risk can be also be approached these situations, so then the company can stay compliant. And of course, for those industries that are highly regulated, this is key, right? Whether it be finance, healthcare, education, government. And finally, how to keep the control and interaction with the providers, because the idea is not like adding, of course that's gonna happen. You're gonna need to add now a provider vet, provider review, right, in terms of the AI, how they are using, as in the case of security. But that gonna benefit, right, everyone, not only the client, the organization, but the third party, in order to improve their posture, right? And that gonna avoid more problems, not only in this organization, but in others where this provider wants to go for their capabilities. So we are having some questions. So I think it's good moment to go to the next section, Yaris. So if you want to take it over. So the idea is anyone that has questions can use the Q&A or the chat, and then whether be something more related that Juan can respond, or Rob, or both. We are open to that as well. Let's have I would say the next 5 minutes, and then a few announcements at the end. Yaris, and thank you
Excellent.
so much, everyone.
Of course, thank you for a great presentation. We do have two questions. The first one is Asana integration required, or can any project management platform be used?
Okay, so that's me. As far as I know, it's built in. This is the Guardium AI security solution is a SaaS only solution. So we, at IBM, we run it and support it for you. So right now, the Asana tool is the tool of choice that we're using for workflow, but it's included in the subscription and whatnot. So there's no extra charge for that.
Thank you so much, Rob. There's another question, and it goes, how often should organizations assess their environment of shadow AI?
I mean, my take, and I'll let Juan, answer this as well, but pretty much continuously, right? Just given the climate around AI and everybody's excitement over it, as we mentioned at the beginning, right? It's pretty easy to spin up some of these environments, and so my recommendation would be to do this continuously. Again, the tool, the Guardium AI security tool, we automatically scan all those environments that you saw defined in our AI inventory. They get scanned on a daily basis, and so it'll discover new instances of shadow AI. It'll discover new vulnerabilities, new misconfigurations, etc. So I would say early and often would be my answer. I don't know, Juan, would you agree?
Yeah, Rob, I would agree 100%. I think the AI space is a dynamically ever-changing landscape. So organizations are always trying to adopt it in various ways. So if there's a tool that can help you scan the environment dynamically and give you real-time kind of updates, I think it's a value add. And I would add that it would also be beneficial to like prepare yourself for when the regulators and compliance and audit comes knocking. This would probably be a good way for you to be prepared in that way. So tackling it from both like the dynamic side of the house where it's ever evolving, and then, you know, preparing for an audit, whether it be internal or external.
Thank you so much. We have we have a couple of more questions, but I want to be mindful of people's time. So let's see how fast we can get through them. There's one that says, how do you engage the board without overwhelming them with technical details?
I can tackle that one, Rob. I think from my perspective, like at the board level, you don't need to provide technical solutions. Your focus is to bring them awareness, visibility, and mainly the focus is what are you asking of me, right? So like in this use case, if I would present Shadow AI and I say I have all of this Shadow AI that I need to one remediate and fix. At the board level, I would bring them visibility as to what I have, and then more importantly, what's my ask, right? Do I need budget? Do I need resources? Do I need to onboard a new vendor? Do I need to partner with a vendor? That's what you present at the board level, and then at the tactical level, more at the project level with the engineers. That's when you really get into the weeds of like, this is the problem and how do we fix it, right? So that's usually how I try to determine what I report, right? Because I think in our field, it's sometimes where we're all very technical. So by nature, we start technical. But at the board level, the many board members don't have technical backgrounds, right? They have more operational or financial or management backgrounds. So you have to break it down in a way that it's digestible, technical terms and technical topics in a very digestible way. And I think the best way is to just tell them what the problem is and what do you need from them to fix it.
Thank you so much, Juan. That makes so much sense. There's another question and goes, what's the best way to integrate AI governance into existing vendor risk management?
I don't want to, if you want to take that, I mean, I'll, my quick take on that would be, you know, just using the tool, in this case, our AI governance, you know, those reports and policies, policy information, the compliance audit reporting that we generate, just kind of, you know, merge that into existing processes that you have for all other, you know, resources that are subject to regulatory requirements. Again, it's more of an operational thing, I think, a little less than product specific. So Juan, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Rob. I would tackle it from two angles. The vendor risk management side of the house, I think because you built the TPRM capabilities, that kind of syncs right in line with what you normally do with vendors, right? I would just add this tool to the toolbox in the vendor management space. And then internally, right, I think because you've built the capabilities of awareness and visibility, I would add it to your existing or launch a new process that includes AI governance, right? Many institutions, including mine, have AI governance kind of set, and any Fortune 500 is working on that. So I think tackling from both angles is good, and the tool will give you visibility internally what you have, and then the TPRM side of the house, I think it's a good way to get visibility as to what your vendors are doing and vetting those vendors, as I mentioned.
Thank you so much. There's a couple of other questions. However, we don't have time, but there's great news that are following the Q&A. Rob, if you don't mind. Thank you. So for those who are interested in joining the CyberMasters program, there's much more to this program than just this webinar. There are recordings, there are trainings, there was a live webinar that we had a month ago. So we would encourage you guys to scan the QR code and just join and take advantage of this great resource. There's two tracks. There's the technical and there's executive track. So make sure to choose, between those two. And we have other news in the next slide. Jose, would you like to talk a little bit more about this? I think this is a
Yes,
great opportunity
here.
for
Yeah,
companies.
we
Yeah.
have only one. Yeah, I'm sure most of you have now the curiosity how your infrastructure looks, right? If we have the opportunity to run a scan and identify unapproved projects. So for limited time and for those making part of the program, we like to offer this free assessment. So we can get together, we can have a free consultation, and it's a very easy way to connect your infrastructure with the tool, and then you can have a quick assessment with some recommendations based on the findings, and then something that then, depending on your own situation, where you are in a university or a healthcare organization or bank or insurance, you always can take this view and make that something happen, right, in the organization in terms of improve the processes or adopt technology or do things differently. But most importantly, a way to avoid, right, that critical assets and confidential information be exposed for innovation. We don't want to, as Juan say, we don't want to stop or hold or block innovation. We want to enable. So having this type of technologies can be critical for that. So for those, the first three that respond, using this QR code, then we're gonna call them, and then gonna have the access to this free assessment. Thank you so much, and it's a benefit of the Master Series program.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, RSEC and IBM, for making this happen. I want to thank Juan, Rob, Jose, all the people behind the scenes, Humberto, for making this happen. This is a great resource to understand how AI is impacting the cybersecurity field. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy, and still you took this hour to share your knowledge. Before we go in the next slide, I would like to invite everybody to join our membership program. We have a gold tier of $7 a month. That's, like I say to people, less than 2 cups of coffees nowadays. But these, we are betting on the many, on the power of the many. So small amounts of contributions, but a big familia coming together to support our mission really helps us keep these programs alive. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here. Raíces Cyber has your back. Thank you so much, RSEC and IBM, once again. And Juan, muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.